Suppose you were taking a trip, whether it's in the country, outside the country, doesn't matter as long as it's far from home. You've got all your plans figured out, whether it's for business or leisure, whatever. Now what you're going to do is you're going to book your accommodation. You'll probably go online and spend a few minutes trying to figure out what suits your price point, convenience, whatever best, whether it's a hotel, Airbnb, guest house, whatever. But what if I told you that more consideration should be put in than just your convenience or price point, and that if you take a bit more time to consider how you book your accommodation, you could enhance your experience 10 times more? Or let's take it a step further. What if I told you that there's another option to how you can travel and consider accommodation altogether that would completely enhance your experience spiritually, physically, and emotionally? That's what we are going to talk about today.
I've been knocked down too much to knock it back up, and I bring the house down whenever the odds are stacked up against me. I know no weapon formed shall prosper. It's tempting to quit now, but I'm refusing the
For the sake of this video, we'll mostly be covering three different types of accommodation. Number one is hotels, number two is Airbnbs and guest houses, and number three is staying with friends, family, or strangers without having to pay them for the stay. And yes, they have to know you're there. We're not talking about stowaways. So the problem we're discussing today is how we value the problem lies in how we value accommodation. If you are looking for top tier accommodation, you're probably thinking hotel because that's luxury. That's the pick up the phone and order a meal from bed. And I understand that you would want that if you're trying to escape from life back home, because it can be so tough and you're just trying to look for a place to relax and live in the luxury, the fantasy of luxury that you don't have back home. And that's fine. But once you've had that, that shouldn't be your continuous cycle of accommodation when traveling. And also, traveling in itself shouldn't only be seen as a vacation or work thing either, but what we're trying to challenge you with today is to broaden your scope when it comes to what type of accommodation you pick. We're trying to inform you on as many factors as possible to help you make as an informed choice as you can possibly make, and to expand your mind about vacation and traveling, because at some point you're going to have to realize it's about more than just escaping work, it's more than just escaping life, and it's about more than just a fantasy of luxury, because there's a whole world out there waiting for you to get to know it. And unfortunately, you're not going to get to know it from the 31st floor hotel room that you're looking out of.
Well, there was actually a Caucasian female said, I moved to Hawaii a year ago, fell in love with the place, and had like this whole like video on Twitter. And a lot of people took it and said, you didn't fall in love with Hawaii, like you fell in love with being able to vacation the whole time and experience all this stuff, while actual Hawaii and the people are very different from what you're showing.
So I'm about to use a visual analogy to further bring our point across. It might get a little bit cheesy, but bear with us. So let's break down the impact the accommodation monopoly has on us as individuals and the people around us. Suppose you're taking a trip to Bloemfontein, for example. Based on South African price averages, a night in a hotel versus a night in an Airbnb, both offering more or less the same standards and services, cost 1,500 Rand versus 500 Rand. So in other words, you could book 2 more nights in the Airbnb for the price of the hotel, or just book 2 other rooms altogether. There are pros and cons to both forms of accommodation though. If it were a business trip, that's probably not something you would want to roll the dice on. You would want the stability, predictability, and security of a hotel, as your goal is to focus on the work and not really to sightsee. But, and this is if we're sticking to Airbnbs and hotels, if your goal for traveling is to soak up the destination, soak in everything it has to offer, then I really urge you to take a chance on an Airbnb. Yes, it may involve a few more risks and a lot of unknown factors, and definitely involves a lot of human interaction that us 21st century people have grown uncomfortable with. But the heart of the community lies in the community chest. All funky analogies aside though, that's an analogy of the impact that staying in an Airbnb versus a hotel could have on you. But I want to explore more the concept of staying at people's houses who you're not paying, like we said earlier, strangers, friends, or family. But this obviously takes accommodation and the risks and the discomfort to a whole other level, because there are way more unknown factors and way less certainties. But that does not mean it's something not worth considering.
All of this is a little different though for someone like myself who hasn't traveled much. The one time I did have a public accommodation experience was when we were in Cape Town in 2019. Because I haven't been to Airbnb before, the experience for me was new. therefore changed my whole perspective on what travel should be like. So in the same way, when I do go to a hotel, that in itself will be an experience and not just accommodation, because with these different accommodations comes different experiences. And obviously, as a person that loves to travel, I would like to experience accommodation in all its forms. Bottom line, if the situation calls for it, try something new, and that includes accommodation.
I don't know if I should look at you or the camera. So now we've spent a lot of time discussing public accommodation, but we really haven't spent enough time talking about the whole family, friends, strangers thing.
I feel like the people that have family members across the country are really best, because then they can actually just move on one family to the other if they wanted to. But I think it is a good idea, because you're gonna be seeing your family more, spend time with them more, and they get to learn about you. You get to learn about them, and therefore build a sort of relationship or memory with each other.
But the truth is, though, it's not going to be possible in every situation. It's not going to be possible for everyone. But it's something that I genuinely think people are not open enough to, because there's just an undeniable beauty that comes from staying with people from a place. Like, for instance, people who really taught us this lesson, I must say, is Yes Theory. If you look at the video where they went to South Korea and they had to find a complete stranger to stay with, and it was one of the best experiences as opposed to just staying in a hotel in Korea. Or at the time that they went to India and they really experienced, and that's scary. If I'm honest, it's a scary thought for me to go to India and stay with a random stranger in India. But there's a certain way you're going to experience India if it's like that you can't get anywhere else. And that's why I love Airbnb. And at this point, it sounds like they're sponsoring us, where they're not.
But no, we're not sponsored by Airbnb.
We're really open to it. I love Airbnb as a concept because it takes the convenience of booking a hotel, but puts you with people who know the place. It's in their homes. Ideally, though, I would want things to work in relationship, where I really want you to test yourself. Instead of just booking your next Airbnb, reach out to that distant cousin, reach out to that YouTube subscriber and be like, hey, I'm going to be in in the area. I know it's an awkward request, but can I crash on your couch for a day or two? And you know what? Wash their dishes, buy some groceries, play a role. But there's that integration that's missing in this century, and that's been deteriorating in the last few decades because we're distancing ourselves because of social media and convenience. But we need to get right back in there. And that's what we're going to have to do on the Live Record trip. We don't have freaking accommodation. We have no accommodation so far for the trip. So the goal is going to be to really switch between hotels, Airbnb, and strangers, friends, and family. We're going to put to test what we've been talking about this whole time. I'm super excited to go to a hotel. Soela's never been there. I wanted to experience the whole continental breakfast situation. Airbnbs are always cool because you get to meet new people, and staying with people in their homes that you didn't pay to stay with. That's just an undescribably different experience with so many blessings that come with it. And that's our video on accommodation. Might just take a picnic blanket, sleep under the trees. If you have a guest room or a couch or something in South Africa, please let us know. We need some places to stay. But I guess hopefully see you soon, virtually if you're watching the videos, and physically if you have a guest room.